Hand where I can see them, boy. That's how Jamal's ordinary Tuesday ended in handcuffs on the cold pavement, next to a pizza he never got to deliver. He was only 15, a high school sophomore, one of the best math students at Booker T, Washington High, and part-time delivery runner for Angelo's Pizzeria in East Detroit. That day, he had just zipped through his fourth delivery, bouncing down Warren Avenue on his beat-up bicycle with greasy boxes strapped to the back. He didn't even make it to the fifth. A silent alarm had gone off a block away. Someone in a brown hoodie had tried to rob a pawn shop broad daylight, smashed glass, fled on foot. And Jamal? Wrong place, wrong time, wrong color. The cops didn't ask questions. They shoved him to the ground, took his battered phone, kicked his bike aside, and called it due process. Jamal kept saying it wasn't him. I was working, asked the pizza place. I have GPS. But their minds are already made up. Black kid, alone, near crime. Slam dunk. They held him for 48 hours. His mother, Miss Tasha, worked double shifts cleaning floors at Henry Ford Hospital. By the time she made it to the precinct, her voice was hoarse from screaming. But they had already filed charges: armed robbery, resisting arrest, and obstruction. They said he matched the description. They said he was uncooperative. They said the surveillance footage was blurry, but suggestive. Miss Tasha had no money for a real lawyer. The court gave Jamal a public defender, Mr. Tillman, a man who looked like he hadn't won a case since the 90s and treated Jamal like an inconvenience on his calendar. Just take the plea, Tillman muttered, flipping through a folder. 2 years juvie, sealed record. Better than risking trial. Don't gamble with 12 white jurors, son. Son. That word sat on Jamal's chest like a brick. Not because of what it meant, but because of who was saying it. Like he owned him. But Jamal didn't take the plea. Because he wasn't guilty. And because something in him, something stubborn and bright and raw, told him that if he didn't fight this now, he'd never stop fighting for the rest of his life. So he asked for something no one expected. He asked to represent himself. The courtroom laughed. Literally laughed. Judge Brantley, a thick-browed white man who looked like he'd eaten half of Detroit's justice system for breakfast, leaned forward and sneered. You think you can out-talk the prosecution, boy? This isn't a spelling bee. Jamal didn't flinch. I may not be a lawyer, he said quietly, but I know how to read. I know math. I know where I was. And I know I didn't do this. The prosecutor, MS. Langley, a sharp-dressed woman with fire-red lipstick and folders thicker than phone books, rolled her eyes. This is absurd. He's a child, but the judge allowed it. Maybe he thought it'd be fun to watch the kid crash and burn. Jamal had one weekend, 72 hours to prepare his own defense. He borrowed law books from the prison library. He read the Michigan Penal Code like it was a comic book. He asked the night guards what hearsay meant. He made flashcards with legal terms. He even asked to borrow Mr. Tillman's laptop for 15 minutes, just to print some files. Tillman sighed and handed it over. When Jamal returned it, the lawyer didn't even look up. On the first day of trial, Jamal stood up in front of 12 jurors who looked nothing like him, in a suit borrowed from his uncle that didn't fit. His tie was crooked. His hands shook, but his voice didn't. He opened with a story. He told them about the pizza deliveries, the receipts with timestamps, about how he waved to Miss Eloise, the old blind lady on Sycamore, right before the time of the robbery, about how his bike tire had a crack, and he'd had to stop and fix it. Had pictures on his phone if they'd only let him show it. He pointed out the inconsistencies in the officer's report. Officer Reynolds said I ran from the scene, but I was arrested sitting on my bike with my phone in my hand, texting my boss. There was no scene. He walked over to the grainy surveillance footage, froze the frame, zoomed. The suspect is wearing black jeans with a white stripe down the side. These, he held up the pants he had on when he was arrested, don't have a stripe. They never did. He pulled out GPS logs from the pizza shop's delivery app. Here, 4:02 p.m. I was on the corner of 8th and Linwood. The robbery happened at 4:05, 3 blocks away. I'd have to be flying. Still, the prosecution pushed back. But your phone could have been manipulated. You could have had help. Maybe your little story's just Theta's story. Jamal looked at the jury. I don't have money to fake GPS logs. I don't even have a lawyer. I have receipts and a bike with a broken gear and a mama who raised me right. The courtroom went silent. He didn't just defend himself. He tore apart their assumptions. He showed poise beyond his years. Calm logic. The soft fury of someone wrongly accused and forced to grow up in a week. At the end of it, he didn't cry, but his mother did. When the jury came back not guilty, Miss Tasha collapsed in her chair. Judge Brantley muttered something no one heard. Ms. Langley closed her folder and walked out without a word. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. How did you learn so fast? Who helped you prepare? Will you become a lawyer? Jamal looked up at the sky. I learned because I had to. I did it alone because no one else would. And I'm not becoming a lawyer. I'm becoming a damn change. The media ate it up. By the time Jamal got home that night, his name was already trending. Jamal Speaks Truth exploded on Twitter. Clips of his closing argument circulated TikTok with over 2 million views. Local news channels ran interviews with his neighbors, his math teacher, even his pizza boss, Angelo, cried on live TV, saying he was just trying to work hard. That's all. That boy's heart is pure. But Jamal wasn't celebrating. He sat on the edge of his twin bed in silence, staring at his old sneakers. Freedom didn't feel like victory. Not yet. Not when he still saw the look in Officer Reynolds' eyes as he was slammed to the ground. Not when Miss Tasha flinched every time she heard sirens outside. Not when the public defender who was supposed to help him never even remembered his name without checking the file. Something was broken, and getting acquitted didn't fix it. The next week, Jamal was back at school, but things weren't the same. Some students called him the lawyer kid. Others avoided him like he carried bad luck. Teachers spoke to him slowly, like he'd suddenly aged a decade. Mr. Simmons, his math teacher, handed back a test and whispered, "You don't have to prove anything here, Jamal." But that was the thing. He still had everything to prove. One afternoon, he was summoned to the principal's office. Miss Carter, a stern woman with thick glasses and a clipboard always glued to her hand, offered him a seat. "There's someone here who wants to speak with you," she said. A tall, clean-cut man in a gray suit stepped in. He had a Harvard pin on his lapel and introduced himself as Marcus Dell, an attorney from the Detroit Justice Initiative. "I saw your trial," he said. "We all did. What you did in that courtroom. It wasn't just brevet, it was brilliant. I work with a group of lawyers who fight wrongful convictions, police bias, systemic injustice. And we need voices like yours." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "You want me to join you?" Marcus smiled. "I want you to speak, to tell your story, to help others who never got the chance you had. You were lucky most kids like you, they plead out. They sit in jail for months before anyone listens. Some don't make it out." Jamal looked at the window. The courtyard was full of freshmen laughing by the vending machines. "How much does it pay?" he asked flatly. Marcus didn't blink. "Not a cent." "Then why should I?" The man's voice softened. "Because someone out there will be next, and they won't know how to fight." Jamal said nothing, but something stirred inside him again. That same raw ache he felt in the courtroom. The heat behind his ribs that said, "Don't let this happen again." So he agreed to one meeting, then another, then 10. Soon, he was speaking at community centers across Detroit, at churches, high schools, small conferences. He stood in front of kids barely younger than him and told them how the system almost swallowed him whole. He told them how it feels to be called boy while wearing cuffs, how to read the fine print, how to demand their rights. He started using terms like probable cause and stop-and-frisk bias like they were lyrics. He became Jamal the advocate, but with that spotlight came shadows. People started digging into his life. Old tweets, past report cards. They said he was milking the moment. One local blog called him an arrogant teen exploiting race politics for fame. Others accused him of making the whole thing up. One night, walking home from a speech at Easter Market, a white man in a Ford truck slowed down beside him and shouted, "Go back to jail, thug." Miss Tasha found a rock with "liar" scrawled across it thrown through their kitchen window, and still kept going, because every week letters arrived from kids in juvie, from mothers with sons in holding, from people saying, "You gave me hope. You showed me it's possible." One letter hit him hardest. It came from a boy named Devin in Chicago, 13 years old, arrested for loitering suspiciously outside a corner store where he was just waiting for his mom to get off work. He'd been in detention for 2 months. No lawyer, no hearing. He ended the letter, "How do I make them see me, Jamal?" Jamal stared at those words for hours. Then he got an idea. He started an online platform, a free resource hub for kids like Devin. It included simple legal rights breakdowns, templates to file complaints, even a guide on how to collect evidence safely. He called it Defend, Detroit Equal Fair Education and Neighborhood Defense. The site blew up. Lawyers reached out to help. Journalists wrote about it. Celebrities shared it. And just when things felt like they were turning, the blow came. Officer Reynolds, yes, that Reynolds filed a defamation lawsuit against Jamal, claimed that Jamal had smeared his name during his public speeches and damaged his career prospects by portraying him as racist and abusive. The lawsuit asked for $250,000. Jamal read the notice in stunned silence. "Ma," he whispered, "they're trying to silence me." Miss Tasha took the paper from his shaking hands. "No, baby. They're scared of you." Once again, Jamal found himself standing in a courtroom. But this time, the stakes were different. This wasn't about a crime. This was about his voice. Marcus Dell offered to represent him. A full legal team, pro bono. But Jamal said no. "I have to do this myself." "You sure?" Marcus asked. "This is civil law. It's a different beast." Jamal nodded. "It's the same game, just a different play." As the trial began, Reynolds' attorney painted Jamal as a reckless activist, an angry teen with a grudge. They said, "He's endangering officers. He's twisting facts for fame." But Jamal was ready. He brought evidence. Video clips of his speeches, none of which named Reynolds directly. Screenshots of Defend's homepage, which focused on policy, not individuals. Testimony from attorneys who said Jamal's work had helped real cases, saved real lives. Then, in a moment no one saw coming, Jamal called a surprise witness. Officer Daniels, the other officer present during Jamal's arrest. He took the stand reluctantly, and under oath, he admitted what Jamal had long suspected. "We knew the suspect was wearing striped pants. Jamal wasn't, but Reynolds insisted. Said he fits the profile. I didn't say anything. I regret that." The courtroom was silent. Jamal stood up. His voice was steady. "This lawsuit isn't about truth. It's about fear. It's about silencing young black boys who speak too loud, who stop apologizing, who stop believing the lies about who they are." He looked directly at Reynolds. "You didn't just try to arrest me. You tried to erase me. But I'm still here." 2 days later, the case was thrown out. The judge dismissed it with prejudice. When a verdict was read, Jamal didn't smile. He exhaled. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. But he didn't give a statement. Not that day. He just walked to the bus stop. Alone, hoodie up. On the seat beside him, he pulled out Devin's letter again. This time he wrote back, "You don't make them see you, Devin. You make them hear you. And once they do, you never shut up." The letter went viral. Jamal had only intended it for Devin. A quiet, handwritten response, folded into an envelope with a prepaid calling card so the boy could call him if he needed to. But Devin's mom, overwhelmed by what it meant to her son, shared it with a local youth advocacy group. Within hours, it had spread to civil rights organizations, social media activists, and eventually news outlets nationwide. You don't make them see you, you make them hear you. It became a rallying cry. It was quoted at protests, etched onto posters, even screen printed on hoodies. Jamal had written it in pain, but now it was giving other kids power. Still, not everyone wanted Jamal to keep speaking. He began receiving anonymous threats. First, DMs telling him to watch your mouth. Then emails with vague warnings. One morning, his bike tires were slashed. Another time, a rock wrapped in barbed wire was tossed at his doorstep. His mother begged him to take a break, to step back. But he didn't. He'd tasted too much of the truth to go silent now. One day, a letter arrived that shook him more than any threat could. It was from a white juror from his original trial. Dear Jamal, I was 1 to 12. I wanted to know I had doubts. I stayed silent, but inside, I was ashamed of how quickly I judged you. You opened my eyes. And since that day, I volunteered at a local reentry program because of you. I don't know if this helps, but I needed you to know. Thank you for changing how I see the world. Jamal read it 3 times. He didn't know what to feel. Anger? Gratitude? Both? That juror had voted not guilty in the end. But it took evidence, logic, math, proof just for them to see him as maybe innocent. But maybe that's what change looked like: slow, messy, imperfect. Still, Jamal's journey wasn't over. Defend had grown. What started as a simple online resource had evolved into a full-scale youth legal empowerment nonprofit. Students helped run it. Volunteer lawyers held workshops. Teachers integrated it into their civics classes. And in the middle of it all stood Jamal, no longer just a kid with a crooked tie in a courtroom, but a leader. His school attendance dropped, but no one dared fail him. He was already learning more than most students ever would. The Detroit Public School Board eventually gave him a hybrid status: part-time student, full-time youth advocate. Unprecedented. One Friday afternoon, while reviewing a defend intake form from a teen girl arrested for trespassing at her own grandmother's apartment, Jamal got a call. It was from the University of Michigan Law School. Mr. Jamal Carter, the voice asked, we'd like to invite you to speak at this year's Social Justice Symposium. Your story has sparked something, and we'd be honored. Jamal swallowed hard. He wasn't used to Mr. The symposium was a big deal. Lawyers, scholars, judge sit was where policies were born, where futures were shaped. He accepted. 2 weeks later, Jamal stood on stage at the Michigan Law Auditorium. He wore a tailored suit, no borrowed jacket this time. The room was packed rows of academics, politicians, and law students in blazers and button-downs. Jamal took a breath. Then he told the story again, but differently. He didn't focus on the arrest, or the trial, or even the victory. He talked about what came after. How many kids never get a trial? He asked. How many are told to plead guilty just to go home? How many are seen as threats before they even open their mouths? He held up a photo of Devin, then another of Aisha, a 16-year-old girl defend had helped get released after being jailed for missing probation check-ins while working double shifts. These aren't case numbers, Jamal said. They're kids. They're me. And until this system sees us as human first, we'll keep fighting. Thunderous applause. Later, at the reception, a professor approached him. You know, she said, you could skip undergrad altogether. With what you've done, there's precedent for law schools admitting exceptional candidates. Jamal blinked. You mean I could go straight to law school? She nodded. You'd still need to prep. Take the LSAT. But yes, it's possible. Especially here. He didn't know what to say. That night, he called his mom. You better believe you're going, she said. We didn't survive all this for you to stop at almost. And so, Jamal Carter began studying for the LSAT. He balanced defend, speeches, and studying. He barely slept. He shut out distractions, refused every brand deal, ignored invitations to influencer events. He didn't want to be famous. He wanted to be unstoppable. 6 months later, Jamal took the LSAT and crushed it. A 174, one of the highest scores in the state. Michigan law accepted him with a full scholarship, with a small note at the bottom of the offer letter. You've already proven you can handle a courtroom. Let's see what happens when you're given the tools from day one. But just when it seemed like the future was his, life threw another curveball. Miss Tasha collapsed at work. A mild stroke, the doctors said. Stress, long hours, blood pressure through the roof. Jamal sat beside her hospital bed, her hand in his, a dull hum in his ears. He blamed himself. All those nights, she stayed up worrying. The media frenzy, the threats, the pressure, all for his fight. I'm sorry, Ma, he whispered. But she squeezed his hand, even with the 4 in her arm. You don't ever say that again, she said. You're not the reason I'm in here. This country is. This life. But you're the reason I keep breathing. She made a full recovery. Slower now, but stronger. Jamal deferred his admission by 1 year to care for her. In the meantime, Defend expanded. They partnered with public defenders, opened a youth legal helpline, secured grants, hired a full-time staff. Jamal gave interviews on NPR, appeared on CNN, sat across from Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley on a panel about juvenile justice reform. He was no longer a boy delivering pizza. He was delivering change. Fall in, Ann Arbor came soft and golden. By the time Jamal Carter finally stepped onto the campus of the University of Michigan Law School as a full-fledged student, the leaves had already begun to rustle under his shoes, each one a quiet echo of the steps he had taken to get there. He was 20 now, not the youngest in the class, but certainly the most talked about. Some professors greeted him with curiosity, others with caution, a few with outright admiration. But Jamal didn't walk into rooms expecting applause. He walked in carrying books, a secondhand laptop, and the weight of every kid who never got the chance he had. On the first day of constitutional law, the professor, an elderly white man with a commanding voice, called him out. Mr. Carter, he said, after discussing Gideon versus Wainwright, since you, unlike Mr. Gideon, chose to represent yourself, would you care to comment? A few heads turned. Some smiled. Jamal stood, slow and calm. Gideon had no choice. Neither did I, really. But what this case taught me is that the Constitution only matters if someone's there to enforce it. Otherwise, it's just paper. The professor blinked, then nodded. Well said. By the end of the first semester, Jamal had ranked in the top 10% of his class. He spoke with clarity, precision, and a depth of experience no textbook could offer. Classmates leaned on him. Professors called him into office hours to chat. Firms asked for meetings. But still, he felt distant, alone in the law library at midnight, staring at court rulings that once almost ruined his life, hearing debates about theory when he'd lived the reality. One night, while walking back to his dorm through the empty quad, he received a call. It was from Devin, now 16 and free. Yo, Devin said, voice steadier than Jamal remembered. Guess what? What's up? I got accepted to the Detroit Youth Pre-Law Academy. Jamal stopped in his tracks. I'm going to be like you, man. I'm going to make them listen. Jamal sat on a nearby bench and looked up at the stars. He couldn't speak for a moment. Proud of you, he finally whispered. That same week, Jamal received an invitation to speak at a national summit in D.C. this time, not just as a former defendant or student or activist, but as a future public defender. He didn't hesitate. On stage at the Lincoln Center, under glaring lights, Jamal Carter told his story for the final time not as a warning, but as a blueprint. He spoke of the nights he doubted himself, of the teachers who overlooked him, of the judge who mocked him, and the jurors who hesitated. He spoke of Defend, of Miss Tasha, of Devin, and the thousands like him who still walk the edge of injustice every single day. Then he ended with this. I was told once that a courtroom wasn't a place for boys like me, that justice belonged to the ones who could afford it, that silence was safer than truth. But here's the thing: justice doesn't start in court. It starts with voice, with defiance, with belief. He scanned the crowd rows and rows of lawyers, lawmakers, and young people who'd flown in just to hear him speak. And if the law can be used to silence us, he said, voice firm, then we'll learn it, master it, and speak louder than they ever imagined. The room rose in applause. Jamal stepped off the stage, no longer the boy in cuffs, but the man people turned to when the cuffs got tight. 10 years later, the courtroom was packed. A teenager sat at the defense table, trembling in a navy blazer 2 sizes too big. His mother clutched a tissue, hands shaking. The charge? Auto theft. He claimed he didn't do it, that he'd only stopped to help a friend, and somehow the keys ended up in his pocket. No lawyer wanted the case. Too messy, too political, too typical. Then the doors opened. Jamal Carter walked in, now 30, suit sharp, eyes steady, a practicing public defender, founder of a nationwide youth justice program, still running Defend. The prosecutor frowned. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Carter, you're representing this case? Jamal looked at the teen, then at the court. I am. He sat beside the boy, leaned in. You ready to be heard? He asked. The teen nodded, and so it began again. Outside, cameras waited. They always did. But Jamal didn't stop to speak. Not yet. He had another boy to defend, another verdict to flip, another truth to tell. Because injustice hadn't stopped, but neither had he. And as long as the system stayed stacked, Jamal Carter would be there on the front lines, in the courtrooms, and in the hearts of every kid still waiting for someone to believe in them. Not just to win, but to change everything. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.